So I'm Luke Forster, I'm the BAUS Section of Trainees Chair, and we're going to get this session started. So we've got a busy afternoon. You'll notice immediately that we're running slightly behind time. So we've got the brand new BSOT Bronze Award, we've got GIRF trainee presentations, we've got updates on the Don't Pay to Stay campaign, an interesting curriculum debate, and then Adam Kay later on, followed by the Silver Cystoscope Award, and the University Challenge is at 5 o'clock. So, as you'll know, BAUS Section of Trainees has been in place about a year now. What I want to give you a flavour of this afternoon is what we've been doing, what we are doing, why it's important, why it's in your interests to try and engage with us and try and collectively try and improve training standards. And often people say to me, you shouldn't have merged with BAUS, you're not going to be able to speak up for trainees, and I'm going to show you why that's not the case this afternoon. And what we really want is that if any trainee anywhere in the country has a problem, then we'll be there to really step up and support them. So hopefully you've noticed the difference in how trainees are at BAUS this week. So we've had a lively programme, we've had fellowship events, we've had the fun run this morning, bouncing back, supporting people unsuccessful in ST application. We've obviously got Adam Kay later on as well. We've got the biggest trainee dinner we've had for a long time this evening, so looking forward to that. Big event tomorrow. It's very interesting, and it's one of the things I get spoken to most often, is how less than full-time trainees and consultants go about their practice in urology. And it's something that's clearly really important. There's a lot of issues around it, and tomorrow's the start. So we want to represent that group of trainees and help them. So whether you're a consultant or a trainee, please do feel free to come to that session tomorrow. I think it's going to be a really, really good session. So BSOT have been busy. Katie's going to give an update later about how we've been fighting for trainees to have appropriate on-call facilities. And as well as dealing with problems in training, we also want to celebrate all the good things about training, all the good things about urology. Everywhere you go this week and this year, you've seen British and Irish urology trainees winning awards, winning prizes all over the world. And we need to support that and celebrate it. There's lots of fantastic things about our training. Even in the last 6 months, we've supported trainees going all over the world to push their skills to the next level. We've had people going to Ireland, Australia, Oxford, Chicago, Denmark, China, Paris, and Sweden. And that's just for starters. We've got money to support trainees, and we want our trainees to be the very, very best there are in the world. It's all about our Twitter account. You need to please try and follow us on Twitter. You'll see all the things that have been going on. And just to look up and down our Twitter feed, you'll see the sort of influence and impact that our trainees are having. Like I say, UK and Irish trainees have been winning awards at EAU. We've been doing surveys of our trainees. We've been teaching on courses in all over the UK for foundation and core trainees. On our Twitter feed, there's links to management and urology courses, and we've also been involved sort of politically. So we've got involved in the prosthesis consultation, and that's the place to be if you want to get rapid updates on the latest jobs, the latest opportunities. I think that really is the future, and we can spread information so fast using Twitter. Just want to flag up something that a group of trainees have done in the last year. So 16 core surgical trainees have done a group charity effort to raise money for TUF. They've done this as individual events, they've done collective events, and the whole purpose is to work together to try and support each other in terms of reducing sort of stress levels and improving sort of trainee well-being. But they've also participated in patient information events and really, really worked well together to make a big impact for charity. Now, in less than a year, they've raised £6,613. So by midnight tonight, that needs to be 7,000, okay? And that's going to be a massive achievement. So dinner tonight, we've got something lined up. So just bring a few quid cash, and we'll hopefully help this group of trainees smash 7,000. The next stage of that, which I think is interesting, is we've got a group of medical students doing their first group challenge for that campaign later on this summer. So I think that's amazing, and I think that's one of our big aims, is to how can we link better as registrars and as consultants to medical students, to foundation doctors, to core trainees, because urology is such an amazing specialty. We want to show that to these more junior trainees. So I think we've got opportunities through sort of formal ways, but also more informal ways like this. And it would be great if over the next year we could expand this charity program. And I think it would be good as a group of registrars if we could do things together. So obviously it would be with the aim of raising some money for charity, but it would also be really good, I think, if we could improve the way that we work together, not just have all the sort of hassle related with work, but also be able to do fun things as a group. So over the next 12 months, we hope that each training region is going to have one big charity event with the view of raising more money for TUF and getting that total even higher. World exclusive here is the announcement that we're going to have a trainee conference next year. So 2020 is a big year for BAUS and for RSM and for TUF. They're all celebrating big birthdays. And to mark that, we're going to have a trainee conference in February. Provisionally, that's the 6th and 7th of February. And what we'd like is to get as many trainees all in one place to have really top sort of presentations, teaching, things that go beyond the curriculum and which are really going to affect the future of urology. Look at how we can improve training and reflect on good examples of training, reflect on how we can make training better. And this is all going to be at the lowest possible cost for trainees. So mark that date in your diary, and I think we could do something really amazing. And just have a think about it, and it would be great if anyone has any ideas or opinions, just talk to me or the reps later on. One of the things that we've done is, as well as those travel awards, is we want, like I say, we want to really celebrate the good things about urology training. So one of the things that we've done is introduce the BSOT Bronze Award. So it's the sort of younger brother of the gold cystoscope and the silver cystoscope. And what we want to do is recognize a trainee who has been a fantastic colleague, someone who helps everyone around them. Don't necessarily need to be sort of academic achievements, although that's part of it. But we just really want to celebrate someone who's made a big difference to those around them and is a great example of what we look for in a trainee. And you'll see we've given a little educational grant with that as well. So this year's winner, the very first winner of this award, we'll talk a bit more about this at dinner later, but this is the very first sentence. A first-rate colleague and doctor, completely selfless in support and mentorship of his colleagues, and always goes above and beyond for patients. So there's another 10 or 15 sentences, all full with amazing praise as well. So it's a great pleasure to award the first Storts Bronze BSOT Award to Mr. Philip Paulson from West Midlands. So that's brilliant. We'll hear a bit more from Phil at the dinner later to tell us what his secrets are. So that's going to happen at dinner later on. Like I say, it's a much bigger dinner than we've had the last few years. Make sure you've got your tickets from Storts. It's fully sold out, and if you could bring a bit of cash as well, that would be amazing to help. So just to sort of summarize as an introduction, this is what we're hoping to achieve with the BAUS section of trainees. You'll get a feel of that throughout the afternoon. What we'd like is to raise the profile the activity and the reputation of UK urology trainees, so both at home and abroad. We've seen it already, but over the next year there's going to be even more activity from us and from the trainee section. What I'd really like is for all trainees to engage as much as possible. I think the more that we can get a feeling of what UK trainees would like and what we can do to help, then we can make a bigger impact. So don't be shy, you can come talk to me, you can talk to your representatives. Each region has a rep, and I'm getting to know them more and more, and they're such a brilliant group of people. So help us to help you and to help improve urology training. And we're really open to ideas. So you'll see this year in the program, there's a couple of brand new events. They came from trainee suggestions. We'd like to know more about fellowships. How do you do a fellowship? Where do you go to find information? And then bang, yesterday we've got a fellowship event. So, we do listen, and we do take action. So we're going to get on with the rest of the session. We've got exciting e-poster presentations now about how trainees can take the GIRFT recommendations forward, and how trainees can really be at the heart of that and sort of making a positive future for urology. And like I say, we've got those other things to come. And remember, University Challenge at 5. I think there's been a bit of chat going back and forwards already, so I think it's going to be interesting. And then, of course, we'll see you at dinner later. So thank you very much. Just for the e-poster session, I'd just like to welcome my co-chairs. So it's a massive pleasure, it's a massive privilege to welcome James Green. So he's a consultant urologist at Barts in London. He's the UK urology lead for quality improvement, is making massive impact in that area. And of course, Simon Harrison, who's the GIRFT lead. So we'll get straight on with the presentations, and I hope you enjoy the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Right, indeed. So welcome to the e-poster session, which we'll crack on with. So can I welcome Dr. Loganathan to the podium to give the first presentation? Dr. Loganathan, all the way from Cairns. Interesting.
Don't know what we're doing in that situation.
I think what we'll do is we'll sort of hold that one back. Is there anyone from Cairns from that group here at all? No? So what we'll do is we can always come back to it, because we could consider it in their absence, because it is an interesting poster. Mr. Nuruddin Eldin, you'll have to, there we are, a little bit earlier than you thought.
So yeah, like the other e-poster session, so it's going to be a 4-minute presentation, 2 minutes questions, and we're going to be quite strict on timings. And we welcome any questions on the app, or if you want to line up by one of the microphones, that would be good. And we'll try and keep it as GIRFT focused as possible.
Dr. Nuruddin.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Mohammed Nuruddin. I'm one of the clinical fellows in the Imperial Prostate team. And I'll be presenting today a project about the implementation of the MDT reviewing of the MRI of the prostate. So, as a background, we all know that the MDTs are under much pressure to get their targets and reviewing the important oncological patients. And in our prostate cancer diagnostic pathway in the Imperial, it was designed to be a one-day service. So the patient got the MRI, reported the same day, and they could also have the biopsy at the same day. And as a quality control measure, we usually review this MRI back again 1 or 2 weeks later in an MDT. So the question in this project was whether this double reporting is important or not. So we looked back in our multi-institutional registry data. We made sure at the beginning of this pathway that all of our urology radiologists are of at least 5 years experience in the field of reporting the MRIs. And we also calculated the cost and the time needed to review all of these patients in the MDTs. And when we got that in this time duration from from April 2017 to October 2018, we got about 273 patients who had got their MRI as double reported. And 94% of them got a concordant report in the second report, and only 6% of them get differences in the second report. And these differences was in the form of upgrading in the PIRADS score in 9 patients and upgrading in the Likert score in 7 patients. And downgrading in the PIRADS score in 7 patients, and Likert was 8 patients downgraded. What was interesting about this project that only 4 patients in these discordant reports that need to change their plan. So after the first report, the plan was not to biopsy them, but after the second report, we changed the plan to offer the biopsy. And we will look at the result of these 4 biopsies. 2 of those patients got a benign prostate, 1 got an insignificant prostate cancer, Gleason 3+3, and maximum length was 1 millimeter. And only 1 patient got a significant prostate cancer, Gleason 3+4, with a maximum length 11 millimeter. So we calculated the cost of reviewing those patients, and according to the national tariff, cost of reviewing 1 patient in an MDT is about £100. And when we calculate for 270 patients, it was about £30,000. So we concluded that it was an important step as a quality control measure to have this double report, but we showing that there's a very low variability between the uroradiologists if they are experienced. And the cost of also reviewing this patient is costly, and it will consume part of the time. And the clinical impact of this double report is very low in discovering the significant prostate lesion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to see some work about MDTs, because I think there's a lot of quality improvement work going to happen in MDT, so it's a good subject to choose. A lot of this is, what you've done is quality assurance. Do you ever see a time when you don't have to have radiologists or consultant radiologists in MDTs at all, and you could do all the quality assurance outside the MDT, because the standard is so high?
Yeah, sometimes it happens. But we usually make sure that all of them are reported back in the MDTs, because it is our quality control step to have them all double reported for the time being.
I think one of the things that I picked up going around the country was that if there's a central MDT, then it's often the reports from the outlying trusts which get double reported. So I think my challenge to people is, well, why isn't the standard of reporting accepted and uniform? So do you have any experience of differential practice between outlying and central?
Well, we didn't look at this specific data, but this data is a multi-institutional. But in every center, this is what's happening in every one center in these 4 centers. So all the centers having this double reporting issue. But we didn't look at like external referrals, whether they are reported there or not. So we don't have this part of data in this project.
Okay, yes, I think I understand that.
Can I ask one other question? In the original abstract, you said there were just 2 radiologists and they were reporting against each other. In this one, were there more? Because in the original abstract, you're just comparing 2 people really who are specialists. And as Simon said, it might be interesting to do generalists against specialists.
Yeah.
Have you thought about how you can improve this work? How can you take this work further forward?
Well, there are a team of radiologists reporting this, and every patient has 2 of them reporting them. I think in the future, if our planning to make this like a more bigger project, we have to employ more radiologists, make sure about their training time, something like that, yeah.
Great. Yeah. Let's move on. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
So next presentation is from Dr. Edward Belay, talking about acute ureteric stones and the Baus and Girft targets.
Hi, so my name is Edward Balai, and I'm presenting the results of a project started while working as an F2 neurology in our busy District General Hospital. So what I'm essentially going to talk about is how we introduced an acute stone clinic model in our department, how that's allowed us to cut time to clinic review and time to surgery, and make good progress towards meeting the BALS 2018 targets for managing patients with ureteric colic, but also the urology getting it right first time report recommendations. So, as the F2 in urology, a common problem that I encountered was the patient with a relatively large stone, representing multiple times to A&E with pain, unable to pass the stone, but unable to manage at home, and frustration at finding the only thing we could offer them was a ureteric stent and the problems that come with that, or a 2 to 3 month waiting list for a procedure such as ureteroscopy. So I sat down with one of my senior registrars at the time, and after collecting baseline data, we basically looked at what our underlying problems were with our service. Now, the Urology GIRFT report looked at the management of ureteric stones on a national basis, and they found there was vast range or variation in the rates of definitive treatment. The hospitals often struggled to offer ureteroscopy, and had a comparatively large number of patients were receiving stents. So the traditional structure of our service was that we had GP direct referrals, or we had A&E referrals through the middle grade on call. From there, the patient could go on to have a stent inserted if required, or they could be followed up in our clinic. We had very few patients who were going for primary procedures. The other underlying problems we identified is that we had a large volume of referrals. We had a very long waiting list for clinic already, with no option for acute clinic review. And in those needing intervention, we didn't have a streamlined pathway for identifying these patients or for booking them in for urgent URS slots. So the registrar that I was working with then on to be a stone consultant in this hospital, and we started to think about ways we could try and improve our service, thinking around the mantra of right person, right place, right time. And after liaising with various teams in the hospital, we were able to introduce this acute stone clinic model. So this was a weekly clinic led by a stone consultant where all referrals were seen with ureteric stones. It was based in the ambulatory care department with ultrasound and CT slots available on the same day. And from clinic, patients were given a clear plan, either a date for follow-up review or a provisional date for surgery on one of the stone consultants' lists. Now, we set ourselves the aim of meeting the BALS 2018 targets of 4 weeks from diagnosis to clinic review or to definitive surgery. We collected data of the first 8 months of the clinic running. This is where 214 new patients were seen. Compared to our baseline data, we found that median time from diagnostic imaging to clinic review was reduced from around 11 weeks to just 9 days. Time to definitive procedure was reduced from 55 to 25 days. And of those patients who required an intervention, we were able to offer a much greater percentage of them a primary procedure and a subsequent reduction in the number of stents being inserted. Preliminary results also showed that the rate of representation to A&E was cut by about 50%. Now, looking below at the control chart, this is a week-by-week compliance with the BALS targets we were aiming for. Overall, there was a significant improvement from the pre-intervention data. You will see that there are obviously some peaks where we met 100% and some troughs where we didn't perform quite so well. We think this represents the fact it was a new intervention, so it would take some time to bed in with each department. But also, this is one consultant running one clinic, so things like annual leave, study leave, holiday periods are all going to have to be factored in. Reassuringly, when we look at the data in the troughs, often patients who are missing the 4-week target were only missing it by a couple of days or a week at maximum. So to conclude, introducing this acute stone clinic model, we were able to make some significant sustained improvements to our service. We were able to cut both time to clinic and time to definitive treatments. We received excellent feedback from the colleagues and the patients using the pathway. We think that the model itself might be something that could be used as a blueprint for other services, but obviously with the understanding that it requires a bit of an MDT approach in terms of tailoring the setup to a department's bespoke issues. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. That was really good, and I think that must be a problem all over the country, I think. How do you think you'll go about making this a sustainable change? Because it looks like a dramatic improvement. How do you think you can keep this going?
So I think the keys to obviously having sustained change with quality improvement is first that when we were deciding what intervention to make, we did a lot of background in terms of resourcing, so speaking to lots of the departments that are involved, also speaking to patients that are involved in the pathway. Second, I think keeping it sustained is you need to have a consultant who's going to champion the process, be there from the invention of the intervention and follow it through and act through with it. And finally, I think it's having your colleagues, and as I said, patients on board with it and having them giving you feedback on ways that you can continue to improve.
Is there anyone? No, I can't see anyone. There's a microphone. There's a comment really, first of all, is just to ask, or to comment, that it's interesting, isn't it, the extent to which we accept mediocrity in just what goes on around us, and then it takes an initiative like this to get going and really make a huge step change, which is very impressive. Now, you use the sort of Virginia Mason, Toyota type methodology to improve that. Is that something that's embedded in your trust as a technique? This is the quality improvement methodology.
Whether it's embedded in the trust, I'm not aware of myself. I think from my experience or lack of experience so far, I think quality improvement across the NHS can come down to the practice of people and how good people are themselves, or how knowledgeable they are themselves about the quality improvement processes.
So what support did you get from within the trust to actually run that quality improvement initiative?
So
get it all
I think it was tied in with the fact we had a new consultant starting who was willing to champion this process. And once they kind of saw that we had other departments on board with making these changes, and that is something that could be sustainable, then I think they were a bit more on board with it, especially after we had sort of the first 3 months of data coming through that were showing promising changes.
I think it was really good to have the baseline data. I think you see so many of these type projects and it doesn't include the baseline data, so then it's hard to see the impact and what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. So I think that was a really good sort of methodology, I think.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. And the next one is Rethinking the Prostate Cancer Diagnostic Pathway, RAPID, by Mariella Tanaka, please.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mariana Tanaka, and I am from Imperial Prostate. Today, we're going to present patient feedback on a RAPID pathway, which is a cancer diagnostic pathway implemented in 3 different trusts. So, the RAPID pathway is a rapid access prostate imaging and diagnostic pathway that entails a prostate MRI, a clinical assessment, and a prostate biopsy on the same day if required based on our protocol. So as you can see, it has been created to try and reduce the time between the referral and the final diagnosis. And because it is a different pathway, we wanted to assess how patients accepted this new form of diagnosis. So it has been developed over 3 different trusts, and the assessment was collected by a third party to reduce any data collection bias. So from nearly 2 years, we had 1,151 patients, and from those, 103 completed the questionnaire. So mean time from referral to clinical assessment, MRI and biopsy was around 9 days. 83% of patients felt that the time from referral to the first appointment was sooner than expected. 60% felt that the time from referral to final diagnosis was shorter than expected. 1/3 of patients did not require any prostate biopsy on their pathway. 20% said they would have preferred to have prostate MRI and biopsy on different days. And overall, 90% of patients felt it was rated as a very good experience. 10% felt it was a fairly good experience, and only 2% reported a neutral experience, and there were no negative feedback. And 99% of patients felt there was a good interaction between the primary care and the specialist care on this pathway. So to finalize, the RAPID pathway shows that this is a very fast access, robust and feasible prostate cancer diagnostic pathway. The acceptability from patients is very high, and as a result of that, we are rolling out the pathway for other trusts in the future. And just some patient feedback showing that the RAPID pathway has significantly reduced anxiety on those patients' diagnostic cancer pathway. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a big piece of work. Well done. In your initial abstract, it was the group that would have preferred a biopsy on a different day was 13%. With your larger cohort, it's 20%. If you do a control chart, that's slowly increasing. Have you looked at that group to ask why they didn't want it on the same day, so you can try and have you thought about making a bespoke pathway just for that group who don't want it on the same day? How you're going to identify them and how you're going to serve that group?
So the number of patients that thought didn't want prostate biopsy on the same day, it's difficult to say because as they fill the questionnaire independently, it's not very clear if they didn't have a biopsy or they didn't have that on the same day. So there are some patients that will not want to have all the diagnostic pathway in that same day, and we do respect that. That what is important to know is that we should offer them the opportunity to have the whole pathway on the same day, and we never force patients to undergo anything they don't want to have. But I think it's important that we offer them the opportunity to have it all on a one-stop clinic.
One of the things that I just wonder about, having been through this process and actually reversed it in the past, because there was that sense of the difficulty of really getting patients consented so that they understand what's happening at every stage, because it's a day of turmoil for them. Have you got, what resource have you been able to put in to make sure that at each stage of the day the patient is supported, well informed, and has time to reflect and think about where they are and what they're about to decide upon?
So one thing that I think is extremely important is all the leaflets and letters we send before any assessment. So all our patients get a protocol leaflet with all the information, what is an MRI, what they should expect on the day, where they should go, where they should wait, who should they talk to in case they have any questions. So they have it all written down before they even come to the hospital, and at any time the specialist nurses or whoever is available will give them any extra support required. And sometimes patients do feel quite overwhelmed, and they actually say, well, after we give them the report of the MRI if they need a biopsy, I don't feel I want to do that. So we give them time to think, we advise them as well as we can, and then we bring them on another day. There's nothing wrong with that.
Thanks. We've got one question on the app. It's an anonymous question. Excellent work, but why as a system do we dedicate so much time and effort to streamlining a cancer pathway when the disease is not time sensitive? What about bladder cancer? So I'm not sure how you answer that.
Sorry, how would you answer that? How would you answer that there's a lot of resource going to prostate cancer?
It's a comment and a question, isn't it?
It's a question. If you want
So, yeah.
It's a difficult one, I know, but I'll
It's
hand
fine.
it over to you.
So one thing it's important to say is that, first of all, the NHS doesn't make any differentiation between prostate cancer and bladder cancer. And we all know that if prostate goes well, everyone else goes well in the trust. Secondly, for the patients, it doesn't matter. They don't necessarily know that prostate cancer won't kill them in a short period of time or in a longer time. So for them, it's essential to have the diagnosis as soon as possible, regardless, because we as doctors know, but they not necessarily know that. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next is Mr. Wong, who's going to talk about doing acute ureteroscopies.
Just while Mr. Wong's coming up, is the first speaker here, Dr. Loganathan? If they can make themselves known to us if they're here. Okay, so we've got a little bit more time for comment or question.
Good afternoon all. So I'm one of the trainees from the Mersey Deanery. So I'll be presenting our experience on the feasibility and outcome of primary ureteroscopy, doing it in an emergency theatre at a large district general hospital. So since the Gulf report, our hospital has adopted a recommendation and changed our practice to perform a more definitive treatment, namely primary uteroscopy for patients with ureteric stones rather than just putting in an interim stent. And as many of you will be aware, performing primary uteroscopy in an emergency theater has its own various challenges, really, and hence one of the reasons why we set out to look at this study. So we collected data prospectively for 6 months period between June to November 2018. And the graph below just shows an overview of the number of cases that would be gradually, slowly increasingly doing primary uteroscopy emergency theater over the time. So over the period of 6 months, there was a total of 905 cases done in emergency theater across all specialties, of which 4% or 37 cases were patients with ureteric stone that required intervention in emergency theater. Out of those, 70% had primary uteroscopy and 30% had stent inserted only. And the reasons for stent insertion only, five patients had the ureteroscopy abandoned as there was some pus when we inserted the guide wire. 3 patients had access failure. Another 3 patients, the surgeon decided preoperatively to stent only because of associated infection. Now, for the primary uteroscopy group, there was 1 patient with bilateral ureteric stones. 3 patients had more than 1 stones in each ureter. And the average stone size was 6.5 millimeters. And the graph below shows the stone location, most of which were distal ureteric stones. Now, in terms of timing of the procedure, actually, majority of our patients, about 3/4 of the patients, had a procedure done same day as planned, so as listed on emergency list. Please note that this is not, this is different and doesn't mean that it's the same day as a patient admission. Majority of them, again, were done during weekdays between 8 to 5 p.m., and 1/4 of them were done around, actually over the weekend as well. And in terms of the primary surgeon grade, is about 50-50 between the consultants and the middle grade. The average operating time was 41 minutes. And in terms of the median length of stay, post-operatively, majority stay for a day. We did, unfortunately, had an outlier that stayed for about 12 days. And 70% of patients had stent inserted after primary uteroscopy. For complications, we had 3 patients with complications, 2 with prolonged stay, 1 because of post-operative pain. The patient was actually without stent, and 1 non-urological issues. 1 patient has small ureteric perforation that was appropriately stented. And in terms of readmission within 30 days, we had 2 cases. Again, 1 post-op pain, 1 with stent-related symptoms. In terms of further ancillary procedure, 3 patients required further procedures to treat their ureteric stone, and this is something that we should bear in mind as well when we counsel our patients for primary uteroscopy. So, in conclusion, in our experience so far, performing primary uteroscopy in emergency theater, at least in our center, in selected patients is actually safe and is actually something practical and feasible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got 2 questions on the app, which I think I can merge into one. So basically, it's saying, was there any drawback of doing these cases in emergency theatre? So with the provision of X-ray, availability of kit, laser safety officer, was doing these cases in emergency theatre okay?
So at our center, you might not believe it, but until about 4 years or so ago, we were still renting a laser. So from renting a laser, had to purchase equipment, setting up laser in emergency theater. But I think the most important, or at least from my observation while I was at the center, is engaging the theater staff, training them to do lasers. And once they've seen a couple of laser cases, and once they were involved in a couple of laser cases, and they'll know that the mean time is around 41 minutes, majority of them were very, very happy to help and get involved in it. And it does help a lot when the theatre staff is actually on your side to get the patients going. And we tend to try to do it first, if we can, first thing or first case in the morning when the general surgeons are actually still doing the ward rounds before they do any general surgical cases or appendix. So those are key things, basically, that I felt during the process. Yeah.
Sorry, we've got microphone 1.
I was just going to say, when rolling it out nationally and thinking of other areas, because this is very common, what sort of hints and tips would you advise other departments that could do to ensure that this works, both fighting with general surgeons and with those that are struggling for theatre space? Is there anything you learned that you could share with us?
So as I mentioned before, I think first thing is engaging with theatre staff. And I think it's useful to have this data as well, because now we can tell the general surgeon, look, fair enough, stem can be quick, but actually doing a primary ureteroscopy takes only a little bit longer, so 41 minutes, so it's not going to eat a lot into their times. And I think it's having that understanding and also the benefit to the patients as well, especially the post-operative length of stay, readmissions rate. I mean, it's not kind of included in this study, but we did look at it, and it all massively reduced readmission rate in terms of complications as well. So I think that that's a key thing, really. So engaging the theatre staff and also advising the surgeons with the audit data that you've got about it really helps in our experience.
We've got 2 more questions from the floor. We've got, number 4 first, please.
Hello, it's Mudden Matney. I'm a research fellow in Bristol. First of all, it's very commendable that you're achieving very quick primary ureteroscopy rates. I just want to know whether, kind of in view of the recent NICE guidelines, whether there's been any move towards offering primary lithotripsy to patients with ureteric stones, and whether the model that you've used for ureteroscopy can be translated towards improving access to lithotripsy as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be, a lot of it's going to be dependent. So for our site, for example, we are a large hospital with about 900 beds, but unfortunately we don't have an on-site lithotripter. So that's going to be an issue, I think, especially, it is something that offers patients, but majority of these patients are patients who are in a lot of pain that can't really wait for another 2 weeks or 3 weeks at the earliest even to come for for ESWL. So I think that model very much dependent on the availability of the on-site lithotripter and how the key area networks is going to work out, hopefully in the next few years.
Again, number 3, please, microphone 3.
Thank you. Zaf Maan, I'm stone lead for, clinical lead for stone disease at Colchester Hospital. I'm very impressed with your work, and it mirrors quite a lot of the work I've done myself. We've been hearing in Darren Smith's session that he chaired earlier on, the stone MDT, this is the direction of travel. I didn't get a chance to ask at the time because there was pressure on time, but I wondered about the split between proximal and distal ureteric stones, and whether in your trust, whether or not you had to make any special provisions in theatre, access to flexible ureteroscopes, for example, and whether or not that's brought about any challenges for you.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question, really. So if we want, during the procedure, we do have access to flexible ureteroscopy because it's on site, essentially. However, I think, especially to begin with, there needs to be drawn a line between what's actually urgent and what's actually elective or semi-elective. So to begin with, for example, if a stone retropulsed into the kidney, generally speaking, we wouldn't be trying to get a flexible ureteroscopy out or trying to fish the stone out, unless there's various reasons. For example, if this patient is not ideal for another anesthetic, for example, because really you don't want to be dwelling too long of a procedure in these patients who are acutely obstructed. And also, we're very grateful that all the consultants, we do the consultant of the week on call, and all the consultants on board are happily engaged. Some of them are, as you see, performed by middle grades who, like many said, are usually quite good at ureteroscopy as well. But some of these consultants are robotic surgeons, although they're happy to do ureteroscopy, they may not be happy to do a flexible ureteroscopy. So there may come a time when we try to expand that, but I think probably we need to try to draw a limit of what to do and what not to do, or push it too much at this time. Yeah.
Could I just chip in a question? Is there any? No,
Hello.
is there anybody standing up? Just the alternative models are to take stones out of. I'm on the podium here.
Oh, sorry.
That's right. That way, it's
Sorry,
very
Mr.
difficult
Harris.
when you're looking somewhere.
Because I was seeing
No,
some
no, no,
candidates
I-
standing, couldn't tell where the voice from.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I know the feeling. So the alternative model is to take acute urology out of the CPOD environment where it doesn't do particularly well. You'd still got a quarter of your patients not getting surgery on the day that they were listed.
Yes.
Have you looked at the idea of either having acute urology lists once or twice a week or adding patients onto elective lists, having spaces for them?
Yeah, so that's potentially the next step forward, really, I think, in terms of having acute urology list, because at the time of this study, we were looking at how long patients take to come back to be listed for the next available list, and it was a list, 8 to 10 weeks before they can get onto an elective list. But like you say, Mr. Harrison, if there is a potential for an acute ureteroscopy list, then that would be an option. But the question is whether they'll let us do it and how often are we going to fill this list in, making sure it's not empty, I guess, or are appropriately utilized. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We need to draw this part of the session to a close. I think all the presentations were good. This is really what we're looking for, a sort of forum for trainees to be able to present their real-life quality improvement and sort of GIRFT initiatives. So everyone's been scored here, and we've got a unanimous winner. So the prize for best presentation this afternoon goes to Dr. Edward Belay on acute ureteric stones and using QI processes to achieve the new BAUS and GIRFT targets. So congratulations. Do you want to come up and get your certificate? So I'd just like to thank my co-chairs. It's been brilliant to have their contribution and their involvement and to be supporting sort of the work that trainees are doing. And I think everyone would agree, hopefully, that trainees are in a perfect position to get involved in GIRFT initiatives. So thank you very much, both of you. Thank you. So next up, we've got some breaking news. So we've added this to the programme. So I'd like to welcome Katie Chan of BSOT and Twitter.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Katie Chan. I'm an ST6 urology registrar, currently on maternity leave at the Royal Devon and Exeter, and I'm here to talk to you about my campaign, the Don't Pay to Stay campaign. Now, many of you will be familiar with this clause in the 2016 Terms and Conditions of the Junior Doctor Contract. And essentially, this clause has led to stories like this where we can see registrars paying really massive amounts of money just to be on call, really, to pay for their non-resident on-call room accommodation. And what I wanted to do, and as part of BSOT, what we wanted to do is really understand the extent of this practice across the UK, predominantly within England, because that's where the contract was applied. And so we sent a Freedom of Information request to all hospitals in England, and we found that 20% of them have a policy to charge their junior doctors for non-resident on-call accommodation, and we had a great response rate of 93% for that. The median charge was £25, but the reported charge from them was up to £65. And so following on from this, I set up a specialist group within the BMA to specifically investigate and negotiate with trusts in this scenario. I presented the work at ASSET and won the Surgical Education Prize. I wrote a letter to the Health Secretary, we did a Twitter campaign, and our data was published in the BMJ news section, and I continued discussions and negotiations with the BMA about the renegotiated 2019 junior doctor contract. And what I learned during this whole process is it's really quite amazing what we as registrars will put up with in terms of working conditions in order to be trained. Managers and chief executives, they don't really understand what non-resident on-call is. They don't understand what poor conditions, the impact that will have on you as an employee. And that's not necessarily their fault, but when it came to negotiating with them, I found that the most effective discussions were where you had proper evidence to back up what you should be doing, like the BMA Fatigue and Facilities Charter, and more recently, the increased scrutiny in terms of in the diagnosis of acute testicular pain to support us in asking for free accommodation for time-critical specialties. I was also really overwhelmed with the consultant support that I got. I got people from all over the country contacting me about the campaign, saying that they felt that it was scandalous and they were working in their own hospitals to make sure that those things didn't happen. And I think that was really nice because sometimes as a trainee, you can feel really isolated with these sorts of things and sometimes feel quite apart from the consultant body. And that really taught me that actually they really care about us and they really want things to be improved. The consultant body is really powerful in the hospital. They may not feel like that, but for me, anecdotally, having worked with the BMA on these issues and also with consultants in local trusts, I definitely felt that consultants were much more effective at managing to change their local practice than it was from negotiating through the BMA, although I have to say, overall, the BMA eventually were successful in the majority of cases. So what is the outcome? So myself and Jeeves Registuria had many discussions and wrote this clause in the renegotiated terms and conditions of the junior doctor contract. The BMA referendum on that closed at midday today, so we will soon know whether those conditions are going to be accepted or not. But provided the renegotiated contract is accepted, essentially, we have won, and junior doctors will no longer be charged in time-critical specialties for non-resident on-call accommodation. That's it.
I'll just quickly add a couple of comments. So I think it's, as Katie said, the consultants had our back on this totally, so I'd like to thank BAUS and the SAC. I think it's important to have their support. And this came from one trainee raising this to their regional rep, who thankfully was Katie, and then the rest's history. So it just shows what can be done, and we won't tolerate trainees being treated in this sort of way. So if there's anything you're not happy with, anything that shouldn't be happening, let us know and we'll deal with it. And that's, Katie's done amazing work for urology trainees. This affects other surgical specialties, it affects medical specialties, it affects all sorts of trainees, and this wouldn't have been picked up by the other sort of sections and things. So I think Katie has done an amazing job for urology and for junior doctors as a whole. So I think a big thank you to Katie. Okay, so we'll move on to the next bit of the session. I think we're doing well on time. So I'd like to hand you over to Dora Moon, who's going to take it from here for this session.
So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the big BSOT debate. So some of you in the room may be aware that there are big changes afoot to the urology curriculum. For those of you that don't know, bear with me, and more information will be revealed as we go along. So the most important part of today is your involvement. So there will be live polling throughout this session. So when you're prompted, go to the app, select this session, select the live polling element, and submit your answers. So, when SURGE was dissolved and formally brought under the umbrella of BAUS as BSOT, the founding principles and ambitions remained exactly the same: to act as advocates for UK urology trainees by promoting excellence in training, support, education, and welfare. The committee felt that healthy discussion and debate surrounding any proposed changes to the curriculum fell well within this remit. And that's exactly what the next 40 minutes are dedicated to, but with your involvement. So, another important element of this is that the SAC are listening. So, They are very keen to hear what you have to say. And invariably, any feedback from today will then go forward back to the wider Specialist Advisory Committee. So if you want to have your voice heard, please get involved. Okay, so a bit of background to this. The 2015 Shape of Training Review identified very low rates of satisfaction in surgical trainees, and particularly those at core trainee level. This led to a development of a structured change in how surgical training will be delivered in the future, in line with GMC standards on how postgraduate training as a whole meets the needs of doctors and the public. And this led to the national pilot Improving Surgical Training. The first pilot started in general surgery in 2018, with the urology pilot due to start this coming August. And this is how it looks. It's split up into 3 distinct phases: core, phase 1, and phase 2, which replace the existing uncoupled core training and ST training years from ST3 to ST7. These pilot posts will be run through, but there will be benchmarking at the end of core training to ensure quality control once trainees then move into phase 1 of their training. So what are the biggest changes on how this will be delivered in the form of a new curriculum? Well, firstly, training towards core competencies in urology are going to be concentrated in the first 3 years of what was ST training, or now phase 1. Secondly, in phase 2, trainees will be able to select special interest modules in subspecialty areas, but those that have an interest in super specialism may be required to undertake a further period of post-CCT training. Whether trainees should have the full exposure to all of these subspecialisms by CCT is currently unclear. Finally, there will be a move away from structured, time-based training with indicative numbers as a benchmarker of quality towards a more flexible and competency-based system. So these are our 3 areas up for debate today. I'm very grateful to our 2 debaters who will be using their wile and wisdom to challenge and sway you, the audience. And after each 3 rounds of furious debate, that's when you will be invited to join in. At the end, there will be no winner or loser, but clearly, if my maths are right, one of them will have won more rounds than the other. If we have time at the end, there will be hopefully some questions to be taken from the floor, or please also submit any comments or questions via the app. So, without further ado, our debaters. In the red corner, we have Sophie Rintel-Hold, an ST5 trainee in London, our BSOT ACIT representative, and she will be debating in favour of the proposed curriculum changes. And in the blue corner, we have Claire Jelly, an ST5 trainee in Oxford, our BSOT vice chair, and she will be offering the counter argument. So off we go. Round 1. Oh, sorry, I'll just introduce the statement. So, training in core urology should be concentrated into the first 3 years of ST training. Sophie, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dora. So, I'm starting with these first images, because it's actually very fitting that we're debating this in Glasgow today, and just bear with my tenuous links. So if we want to understand a little bit more about what a curriculum is, we have to know what the word actually means. And it means correre in Latin, to run. It also means to race, to be on track, and it also means chariot. And what is the most famous running film of all time? Chariots of Fire. And it was the iconic opening scene that was filmed just up the road in St Andrews. And also it was a Scottish Olympic runner, Eric Liddell, who was one of the medal winners. And also the first use of the English term curriculum was at the University of Glasgow, just at the other side of the Kelvin Grove Park where we ran today. And ultimately we are on a track when we're training. And therefore, when debating how to train the urologists for the future, we need to accept that we may not all be the same, but we need to come into a process. We need to learn, we need to be ready to be independent within an acceptable time frame. And the race is to become a consultant urologist in an ever-changing NHS. But I don't think we should accept our training is just to achieve competence. We would want to achieve excellence, and therefore a shake-up of training with potentially a new curriculum is well needed. And if we're going to consider how to train the perfect urologist, we do need to make sure that the track is fit for purpose. And I will argue that you don't need to be an expert in everything, and you probably can't be good at everything either. And it's a combination of factors, not just operative, but ultimately it's about experience, about leading, and delivering excellent patient care. And so the new curriculum suggests that trainees should be competent in core within the first 3 years and do 80% of that. So it's your killer core training years. And this does reflect the heart of urology, and we should be proud that it's what we give our patients the majority of the time. Claire will argue that at ST5 you won't be independent, but I would argue that in these 3 years of intensive killer years, you should be. And why put a marker of time when you're ready to be doing independent lists? Instead, it should be judged by your trainer. And the new curriculum may be advantageous if you are considered competent earlier, as not necessarily one size fits all. And there is a wide variety of training worldwide, so why is 5 years in the UK the magic number? We come to ST with a variety of skills and experience, but the first ST years are formative, and the majority are on this learning curve. And so by placing emphasis on the core, then maybe it will help trainees in mastery and accelerate that learning curve to competence and independence. And therefore, a new curriculum may enable training to be more efficient, with emphasis on placing trainees in centres that actually deliver these core lists, and core clinics and core operating lists. And then perhaps the avoidance of centres that only are celebrated for their specialist services. This focus on core is not new. There's already checkpoints, but the exposure is variable. And the wide variability in training is not fair. And by reflecting on how best to give training, we can share how and where it is currently being done well, and therefore put trainees in those centres. And why can't hospitals have a league table of who's doing well, who's offering which procedures? Why don't we discuss the experiences we're getting? Training shouldn't be a byproduct of just turning up to work every day. So there is an ever-going struggle on providing the best training with mixed satisfaction and varying trainee and trainer focuses. There are many characters. There's the good, there's the evil, there's the teacher, there's the helpful and the not so helpful robots, and also outside influences, the changing empire of the NHS, an aging patient population. But core is the most important part of urology and should underpin our clinical and surgical skills. And therefore, the change in the curriculum forces us to how best spend these 4 years, first 3 core years. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. So, Claire, if you'd like to offer your response.
Thank you. So what is core or general urology? Are we just a jack of all trades and master of none? Or do we actually have to be highly skilled across a huge range of subspecialties? We know that we went into urology for the variability in itself. And what would you expect of a general or core urologist? You'd expect him to be able to see a patient from a variety of different subsections and be able to put that initial management plan in. We're all seeing 2-week waits. Do we have the adequate knowledge to be able to put an initial plan in and refer on as appropriate? We all know a consultant that calls on his knowledge when he did a 6 months rotation in female. And if we have no exposure to to those subsections, are we actually going to be able to be adequately trained as a good general urologist? We've seen squeezes on the hours of our training before, and we've seen reduction in urology from 6 years to 5 years and the introduction of fellowships. Are we going to put ourselves into a difficult time frame when we're going to end up with just 3 years of urology training and then fellowships coming in? Maybe this is something to consider for the future. I believe that an integrated approach is better than the modular approach that's being suggested. I think it suits real life a little better. as much as the modular approach, I think, is probably happening in bigger centres, when you look at the smaller hospitals, which are probably more common across the country, you see mixed operative lists, you see mixed clinic lists. So as trainees, we need to be able to call on different groups of knowledge. And I believe you need a good foundation that you can then build on, so that you're seeing patients from different subspecialties. As your knowledge and skills grow, you're better equipped to deal with the exam at the end of the day. We all know that book work and simulation is no substitute for actually seeing patients and having that direct interaction. Now, there's more than one way to skin a cat or do a circumcision. And when it comes to surgical skill, we know that there's not one agreed approach in a lot of the operations that we do. By doing a condensed 3 years, are you going to be able to get that variety and that range of exposure to both different patients, but also to different approaches? As trainees, we take good and bad bits from different surgeons and develop our own way of doing it. Are you going to have the confidence to develop your own technique in just the 3 years? Or does that confidence also come with experience and wealth of knowledge? And I believe that condensing everything, you might struggle to develop your own way of doing it. And if you've got multiple approaches, when you end up with a really difficult case, you've got more hints and tips. You've got more things to think about so that you can get yourself out of difficulty. Nobody likes doing a list of cystoscopies and biopsies all day, or do they? Different approaches and different opportunities have different learning. So in ST3, doing a cystoscopy and biopsy list is learning the procedure, is getting confidence in what they're doing. But in ST7, doing the same list is actually learning a load of non-technical skills. He's got to consent the list, manage the list, finish on time, deal with any difficulties within it, be able to complete that list. And that's a great stepping stone for when they're then considering consultancy, getting your confidence levels, feeling like you're ready to move on. So removing all of those core lists and condensing them into 3 years, you miss those opportunities for those non-technical skills and those additional areas of learning. And if we're not doing a lot of core for 3 years, we may get really great at it, but then what happens later on where we're not doing it as frequently? Now, for some people, it may be just like riding a bike. You never forget it. For others, you might find it difficult to get back into that system, and you certainly don't want to be on the back foot when you start consultancy. Let's talk about emergency urology. So if you take your average Joe urologist and they're in a DDH hospital, it's expected for them to be able to do 95% of urology. But what about the other 5%? Is it just going to be a situation of blind panic? Are we going to phone a friend? Are we going to send that patient to interventional radiology? And are we going to send that patient to another hospital to manage that complex condition that's not considered as part of core urology? The obvious one to talk about is the need for an emergency nephrectomy. When you look at the data of people presenting to GDHs and tertiary centres, it's actually the same sort of conditions. So you're just as likely to get a bleeding kidney in a DDH as you are in a tertiary referral centre. And are you going to have time to phone a friend? Are you going to have interventional services? I don't want to be that registrar that can't, or that consultant that can't at least start the operation while you've got people coming in to help you. And are we then going to leave ourselves open to dodging the balls of medical legal issues if we can't treat that patient? Again, if we don't get exposed to all of those subspecialties, we lose our transferable skills. And this is especially important when you're looking at on-calls. Say we can't do that bleeding kidney, it's not appropriate for us to treat it. So who's going to treat it? And if we've not exposed to andrology, how are we going to know how to treat a priapism? Is that considered core urology or not? And in the worst case scenario, if we extrapolate this, are we going to end up with a 5-tier system where you can't deal with any subspecialty emergencies, you've got to refer them on, which might be appropriate in a big centre, but certainly not in a small. And nobody went into urology to do 1 in 2 on calls. So my belief is that the approach is too modular. The current integrated approach is better because it simulates real life more, it allows your confidence to grow, and the repetition solidifies your skills and your knowledge. There's a danger that this 3 years of core could actually end up with our training being really significantly reduced, which with working time directives and time may make things even worse for us. And there allows for these significant gaps, which may leave training open to medical legal issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I think Sophie's just got one more point to make in response.
Yeah, I think emergency urology is a big concern for everybody. And so just to counter your argument about this, I just wanted to say that actually emergency urology is predominantly not necessarily things that have to go to the operating room in the middle of the night. And similarly, we don't have to learn all these things in an operating theatre, but certainly we can also learn via simulation, cadaveric courses, and also whilst we're on call. But actually, if you look at the data, and there's a recent audit that's about to be published that showed that the emergency presentations to a DGH and a teaching hospital was much the same in its breadth, showing stone disease, hematuria, retention, the acute scrotum, and sepsis. But actually trauma, whether that be ureteric, renal, and bladder, made up a tiny proportion, 0.3% of presentations at a DGH and 1% at the tertiary centre. And in our King's audit of renal trauma, only 3%, that's 5 cases over 9 years, needed to have an emergency nephrectomy. So this rare event, whilst critical to do well and manage correctly, cannot surely justify all trainees needing to sit through 10 or 20 nephrectomies for that small possibility of needing to do an emergency nephrectomy. And actually, how many current consultants who aren't doing a nephrectomy in the daytime would be happy to do it at night as an emergency? And realistically, these are trauma cases in a trauma centre with interventional radiology, with trauma surgeons, and therefore it may unfortunately strengthen that argument for two-tier on-calls. And if you want to do kidney surgery, you may just have to accept that you will be that friend that people are phoning for you. Ultimately, medicine is changing, and we should still be able to offer safe emergency care and ensure that our patients are in safe hands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Some very good points. So everybody please get your phones out, go to the app, and state whether you agree or disagree with the statement training in core urology should be concentrated into the first 3 years of ST training. You've got 15 seconds. Yep.
The SAC are watching.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just some technical issues. Okay, fine. So, sorry, just a few teething issues. Okay, so interesting. We have a total of 65% disagreement with the new proposed changes to how core urology should be delivered. Okay, keep any comments and questions until the end. I think we'll move on to our second round of discussion.
You said there was no winners, right? Okay, round 2.
So, all trainees should be exposed to the entire breadth of urology. Hopefully this will be an easy one.
Okay, so there is a general shift throughout urology towards subspecialization and inherently towards centralization as well. And this is encouraging surgeons to do high-volume surgery with the assumption that this will deliver better patient outcomes. But actually, urology naturally can be divided into areas, and some can even be super specialized further. And the fact is that some of them don't really overlap. We can't all be good at everything. We don't have the same interests. We bring different skills to the departments that we work in. And therefore, you do have to treat trainees and surgeons as individual and let them do what they are good at and what they enjoy. And what you're good at is made up of a multitude of factors. And so training should reflect that. And once the core of urology has been done in those first 3 years, then trainees should be allowed to go on and experience a more meaningful period of training in an area that they want. This gives us autonomy and will surely increase patient satisfaction. A 3-month, a 6-month, or a year in an area of urology at a specialist centre is surely more valuable than sporadic lists and clinics speckled throughout training. And turning up to a list of penile implants or robotic prostates just to say that you've done it and tick that box is surely not a useful exercise. And from a trainer's point of view, I'm sure they'd rather somebody that was engaged and wanting to be there and train them over somebody like a junior trainee who's just there because they can't be placed anywhere else. And we probably don't need every urologist to be trained in every area of urology, as some may never see or perform that operation from the day that they get their CCT. Instead, they can just get on with fighting over the best subspecialty to be in. And if the focus of the new curriculum is core and being emergency safe, then the specialist areas of urology will be admittedly something that we learn as consultants. But our lifespan as working urologists will be long. And it's naive to think that we won't need training once we finish our actual ST training, because new technologies and new working systems will force us to continually learn. But isn't that a good thing? Lots of current consultants have weaved their way through urology and changed their focus of work throughout their careers. The exam will inevitably test the breadth of urology, and that will drive learning in these areas, but it's not the same as needing to be competent in every area. And we may be inspired seeing surgeons doing these specialist procedures, but actually the exposure to the breadth of urology can occur in other ways, such as attending BAUS this week, going to your teaching. And so the new curriculum shouldn't dumb down urology, but it's a shake-up of the status quo, which, as it is, isn't perfect. The beauty of urology is its breadth, and the new curriculum recognises that core urology is in itself a specialty, and that should be the focus for the first 3 years. And then we can choose an area, a subspecialty module that we are interested in, giving a more in-depth, more meaningful training, and would allow trainees to excel in these areas rather than being a jack of all trades when we finish.
Okay. And Claire, if you'd like to respond.
So is it really your choice? So this would get rid of those days for some of watching loads of robotic prostatectomies when they know that they have no interest in doing the procedure. How do you know that that's not what you want to do and that you aren't the next budding robotic surgeon? If you don't get that exposure to the breadth of urology early on, how can you figure out where your skills are best suited? And when you do decide, how can we implement that? Are the deaneries actually able to support this? Can we place all trainees in a subspecialist rotation that they want? Andrology is a great example. If you take 2 trainees that both want to do andrology, can any given centre actually support that and train them appropriately? And is this just not going to put further squeeze on that balance between service provision and training? And what about flexibility? We've all got stories of consultants that started off as a stone surgeon and moved into another area, or vice versa. If you've never had any exposure at all, you're picking your selected path very early and pushing on through it. There's very little change that you can do. And the only person that really loses out in that situation is you. And that might be a lot for your job satisfaction and for the future that you want. And I talk again about the loss of transferable skills. We're seeing less and less open operating being done, especially with robotic prostates and robotic cystectomies. How are you going to learn those open pelvic skills? And when you do stand and observe a laparoscopic nephrectomy, you don't realize that you are learning and you're becoming dexterous in what you're doing. The same with standing next to a robotic prostate. I would argue learn more than observing a laparoscopic nephrectomy. You're actually using both your hands and developing your laparoscopic skills. And take the kidney surgeon who's going to do a partial nephrectomy. Surely they would be better served with a period of doing pelvic work, learning to use the robot deep within the pelvis before moving to something much more complicated. We can all learn something from the subspecialties and take that through with us to our chosen area. And the new training program says you do these 3 years intense, these additional 2, but you still may need to do further fellowships. So what is all this shaking up hoping to achieve? The whole aim is so that when we hit the ground running after 5 years, we're fit for purpose, we can do our job. But you may still need to do these additional fellowship years. So is this shake-up actually going to make a significant impact, or are we going to end up in a situation where we're putting more pressure on TPDs, more pressure on departments, so that we're actually unable to achieve what we were previously doing?
Okay, so phones out again. Please select whether you agree or disagree with the statement, all trainees should be exposed to the entire breadth of urology. Wow, okay, yes, pretty decisive. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I think we'll move on to our third and final round. So the last discussion point for debate. Competency-based training should replace time-based training and indicative numbers. Start us off again, Sophie.
So I don't think that indicative numbers are needed, because I don't think you need indicative numbers to prove that people have had an experience in the breadth of urology. They only focus on the operative skills, which is a small proportion of the urologist's work. The numbers themselves are not pulled from any evidence, and they are seemingly random. And the number that you reach does not necessarily prove competence. It may take me 100 times to do a decent TRBT. It may take Claire only 50. So why make her do more, and certainly make sure that I'm competent before signing me off? Currently, very few people reaching CCT are actually achieving all their indicative numbers, and this must indicate an element of discretion or illustrate the futility of the task. Instead, there must be other ways in which candidates have proved to be ready to progress. And this graph here shows the huge variability of training, with some trainees doing 3 times more of these procedures than other trainees. And WBAs are also being seen as pointless and not a reflection of training, or necessarily being a good trainee. Darren Smith recently published his resignation from being a trainer because of the effect of WBAs, as he felt they were meaningless. And similarly, indicative numbers give an objective measure of attendance and engagement, but they're not necessarily rational, as per Mr. Glass's blog. And so therefore these indicative numbers don't necessarily translate into excellence or training. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sophie. If you can make your final point, please, Claire.
Obviously, I disagree. So, what are indicative numbers useful for? I think they're a quantitative measure. They're useful for the trainee themselves. So you've got 5 years to do your training. How can you measure where you're supposed to be at 2 years or 3 years down the line? I think they give you a goal, they subdivide what your training needs to be expected, and you can see where you are and where you're expected to be. Remember, they're a mixture of WBAs as well as numbers. They're not just purely the numbers of procedures that you see. They're a good comparator, so you can speak to trainees in your region. How many numbers have you got? What level were you at when I was at your stage? And what about other trainees that you know in other deaneries? How are they getting on? Are they getting better or worse training than you? What level are they at? So they're a great quantitative comparator in that sense. When we're in this constant battle between service provision and training time, I would argue we can use them as a bargaining tool. If you need to get 10 PCNLs by the end of your training, you need to have time to actually go to those theatre lists. So hopefully that's one less flexible cystoscopy list you've got to go to, because you know that you need to make time for your other areas of training. And then when we look at placements, how good is that placement? Is that placement right for this type of trainee? What sort of training are you getting there? We can use the indicative numbers to measure the quality of that training and the quality of the placement. And I've seen it happen in deaneries where they can reshift and readjust timetables to ensure exposure is adequate and make sure you're getting enough cases that you need so you can achieve your outcomes. And it makes things a little easier for the TPD. There might be other hospitals that are particularly good at core or maybe struggle with certain numbers, or you may have a split with your andrology and female. They can see where people are getting their indicative numbers and place them appropriately. It gives them more options of who needs to go where and what needs to be done. And without them, what other measure do we use to guide us in that sense? I would also argue with all of the new curriculum changes that are coming in, will they act as a quantitative measure to see how good the new curriculum is? If we find that people aren't able to achieve their numbers with all this new training, then has it worked? Is it the right thing to do? Do we need to adjust it further? And again, if we're not going to use indicative numbers, what measures are we going to use? And what other approaches do we have to try and come up with some form of hard evidence as to what we're doing and how well we're getting on?
Okay, thank you both. I think you both put across very compelling arguments. I wonder if this will be as controversial as we think. So for the final time, if you could take your phones out and decide whether you agree or disagree, whether competency-based training should replace time-based training and indicative numbers. Sorry, if you didn't get to vote, just try again.
Try again. It's my fault.
Yes, touching it. Just let it.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, keep going, keep going.
Okay, very interesting. So, it's slipping down somewhat. So, okay, so over half of the room possibly agree that competency-based training is a better way to go. I think we have possibly about 5 minutes for some questions. We've got a few through the app already. Please feel free to use the microphones as well.
I think I can try and answer a couple of questions. So there's a question about the exam. So plan would be to still have the exam at the same time, having completed ST5. Question about making core urology a separate section of BAUS, big BAUS rather than BSOT. I know BAUS do really value the core urology, and I think they're trying to integrate core urology into their other sort of subsections. So I know that's a priority for them, but you would have to ask the BAUS leadership about that. IST training's a tricky one. So obviously urology is starting IST in the summer. There's been a suggestion that IST should come in without the trial, that it should just be implemented. The SAC and BSOT have strongly opposed that. So the plan is just to continue with a trial run of that. With general surgery, the IST feedback's slightly concerning, so we're going to be watching closely to see how that goes.
I mean, we've had one question. If we didn't have indicative numbers, what sort of framework would trainers use to gauge competency? I don't know if one of you would like to take that question.
Okay. Can you just repeat the question?
If we didn't have indicative numbers, what sort of framework would trainers use to gauge competency?
Well, I think actually, I think there is going to be a change in the WBAs, and so these will reflect more competency-based assessments that won't necessarily just reflect operative experience, because at the moment indicative numbers just are related to operative skill, or not necessarily skill, but just attendance. And so I think there will be a shift. It's currently not disclosed, but this is the sort of thing that we need to work on, what will work for us, and also what will be useful in terms of getting that feedback, getting more coaching and more mentoring, more apprenticeship interaction with our trainers, rather than just signing up and just getting something in our logbook.
So I think what we know so far is there's going to be more sort of multi-consultant assessment, There's going to be things like your ability to run a clinic, do a ward round, those sort of skills, rather and less sort of the tick box sort of WBAs that we have at the minute. I don't think we know for sure what's happening with the WBAs.
And then Claire, I don't know if you'd like to take this question. So somebody's asked, with IST looming, do current trainees feel a move to 100% run-through training as proposed is good for our specialty?
Is it good? I think IST it's an interesting one. I think we have to be careful how we structure it and how we structure core training. And I think if we're going to move straight to a run-through, we need to really push as to how we're going to recruit. So there are a degree of trainees that started out wanting to be general surgeons and then decided to do urology and core training. And we're going to lose those people. If we really want to get people into run-through, we need to push with medical students, push with foundation, and make sure we get early exposure to urology. Otherwise, we're going to struggle to get people into our speciality, as often they're exposed to it, I think, in general, later on.
Thank you. So I think Luke's just going to offer some final comments, but could everyone just sort of give a big round of applause to our two debaters?
Yeah, so thank you very much. It's really useful. It's really useful to get an idea of my sort of colleagues' views and also everyone in the audience. I think so. I've been involved in the curriculum since sort of December time, and what's absolutely clear to me, both before today and today, is that trainees want better training. We don't want any reduction in the standards of training. We want to be the very, very best consultants we can be. What it also shows is the power of trainee engagement. So the sort of final details of the curriculum have been delayed pending today's discussions, and the curriculum looks quite different today as to how it did at my first meeting back in December. So I think it really does show the value of engaging with us, your representatives, your consultants, your trainers, and we can try and take things up with the SAC and BAUS depending on what the issue is. I think what's also clear is that these tick box indicative numbers, tick box assessments are frustrating us, they're frustrating the trainers, and I think it's sort of not really a particularly efficient way of assessing training. But what I would say is I think when there's so much change happening around the curriculum, it may be that some of the indicative numbers are needed at the moment to ensure that there's sort of quality training provided when all of this sort of transition's happening. I think the curriculum's ambitious. I think if there's to be most of the core done in 3 years, I think some regions and some hospitals would have to change their approach to training quite a bit. I think there would have to be a lot more efficiency in training, a lot more focused training, and perhaps less service provision. I think with the numbers of trainees sort of less than it has been previously, I think trainees can expect the very best training, and if that doesn't happen in a particular hospital, there'll be another hospital down the road willing to offer that. But I think different regions are going to be having different issues. Some regions may find the core bit more difficult. Some regions will find the subspecialty modules more difficult. But what we need TPDs, we need trainees to work together locally with their BSOT representatives to come up with the best plan to make sure that we can ensure that training's the very, very best it can be all over the country. So I'd just like to thank everyone for this afternoon. I think it really does show with the things that we've been doing between the curriculum and the Don't Pay to Stay campaign and everything else we've been doing, the power that a trainee voice can have. And like I say, I just urge you all to get to know your local representatives. They'll be giving you information, but you can give them opinions. We want to hear what's going well, what's going not so well. And we can learn from each other. I've been hearing about fantastic things that have been happening in some parts of the country, and other places can learn from that. So we need to share, what's going well, what can be done better. And please do get to know the reps. So come to dinner, come to the stand later, and we can work together to try and make things even better. What I really want to say as well is that there's so much good happening in urology training. So it's easy to look at some of the issues that are going on, but there's also lots of fantastic things happening as well. So congratulations again to our prize winners, and we look forward to celebrating the ongoing success that urology is having. So next, and our sort of headline act, without doubt, is I'd just like us to give a very big BAUS welcome to Adam Kay.
So, good afternoon, how are you? I'm fine, thanks. Manners cost nothing, surgeons. So yeah, I was going to talk to you a bit about my experience of being a trainee, really. I think quite a lot about why I went into medicine in the first place, and I don't have a particularly good answer. I think that there's a big issue which goes from when you apply to be a medical student all the way through to beyond when you're a consultant, which is no one really does a very good job of pointing out the bad bits of the profession. And it is the most amazing job in the world, but it isn't without its issues. If you want to be a train driver, they'll make you speak to someone as part of the application process to ask the question, if the worst happens and someone jumps in front of your train, you're going to be able to hack it. If you want to be a pilot, someone will ask the same question. If you want to go on Big Brother, they'll make you speak to a psychologist. If you want to be a doctor, there's none of that. They want you to have loads of A's at A-level. I think we can probably all agree the best doctors aren't always the cleverest doctors. And they want you to have loads of extracurricular activities as this sort of strange surrogate measure for what it means to be, a good doctor. And if you look at the Wikipedia entry of any famous doctor, it's always been the same. So here's one. He proved himself an accomplished rugby player in youth leagues. He excelled as a distance runner, and in his final year at school was vice-captain of the athletics team. And that's Harold Shipman, so it's not a totally rock-solid system that they use. And some medical schools are starting to introduce sort of situational judgment tests, which are sort of on paper meant to deal with it. But I've looked at all the various tests the medical schools use, and it's a bit like the driving theory test. Those of you who are young enough to have had to do that. The driving theory test is like, before you turn left, you look in the wing mirror or the glove compartment or the, Beano. And these situational judgment tests are like, you've made some horrific drug error. Do you manage the patient clinically, explain to the patient and their family, tell them about pals, tell your bosses, sort of thing? Or B, burn down the hospital, C, move to Rio. And so there's a nod towards trying to do this sort of thing, but I don't think it's enough. And then at medical school, there's no real sort of tuition in how you're going to cope when some of the days aren't as good as the others. And the closest thing that I had at my medical school was this sort of Christmas show, sort of annual terrible reviews where you make fun of your consultants and your professors and whatever. And it hadn't occurred to me at the time, but they were sort of teaching us some kind of coping strategy, albeit a slightly oblique and, relatively useless one compared to the actual ones. But when I qualified as a doctor, it's sort of all I really had. And so I found myself writing down the funny stuff and the weird stuff and the gross stuff that happened, and that ended up being in this book. So I was gonna read you a few bits out from that book and just talk a bit around my experiences in medicine. Oh, this is appropriate, and it's sort of, it's become my, I don't know, my creep or something. It's from the 7th of February 2005, and it concerns a degloving injury. Patient WM is 18 and was out celebrating with friends after receiving his A-level results, 3 Cs. After chucking out time, he found himself dancing on the roof of a bus shelter, then decided to get back to ground level using a neighbouring lamppost as a fireman's pole. He jumped onto the lamppost and slid down koala bear style. He had misjudged the texture of the lamppost, which provided a lot more friction than he had allowed for. He therefore presented to A&E with severe grazing to both hands and a complete degloving of his penis. This is far and away the worst penis that I have ever seen. And I have seen a lot of penises. A couple of inches of urethra coated with a thin layer of bloody pulp, maybe 2 millimeters diameter in total. It brought to mind a remnant of spaghetti stuck to the bottom of the bowl by some tomato sauce. The patient was upset. This was made worse when he asked if the penis could be regloved. The consultant explained that the glove was spread evenly up 8 foot of lamppost in West London. I did my house officer I did 3 months in urology, and so was able to fairly quickly cross urology off the list of potential careers. I do thank urology very much for providing a lot of anecdotes that really helped book sales. The man who decided to coat himself totally in chocolate, body paint, lie on the kitchen table, achieve an erection, a small achievement in the scheme of things, and insert and light a thin birthday candle in his urethral meatus, which is probably the correct term. So, I mean, you know, sort of thanks urology for that. But I did, through my house officer time, and equally well through my medical school training, I never found the specialty that made me go, oh, this one, ophthalmology, or whatever it was going to be. I was sort of always hoping that I was going to stumble across it, but every time it was just a bit like, because I hadn't really thought about applying to medical school in the first place. I came from a family of doctors. I went into a school that shat out doctors, and I was, and so I just sort of landed up there at 18. And that's it's a bad age to decide to do anything, let alone what you want to do for the rest of your life. And then when it came to choosing a specialty, that was where I made my next mistake. I was drawn to obstetrics because a registrar, when I was a med student, explained that when you're on labour ward, you only have to learn how to do 4 things. So caesarean section, ventouse extraction, forceps, and then sewing up whatever mess you made. Any obstetricians will claim there's slightly more to it than that. You have to know when to do each of your 4 tricks. But basically, that's all the specialty boils down to. And added to that, you end up with twice the number of patients you start with, which is not a batting average you can boast in urology. And I did a lot of infertility clinic as well. And another amazing thing, these are people who, relatively few decades ago, it's impossible for them to have children. That was very rare to say you can't have children for reasons other than money, but that's a slightly different conversation. So I was drawn to obstetrics. But no one really explained that every medical specialty is a sine wave, and the higher the highs, the lower the lows. And I'd chosen one of the very steepest sine waves. And in an acute surgical specialty, you're probably slightly flatter, but it's still a sort of fairly significant sine wave. At the bottom there's like dermatology or something, derma holiday. But nothing's ever a flat line. There's always a sine wave to it, because if you say that's a mole, go home, and it was a malignant melanoma, you, the dermatologist, have killed your patient. So I went into obs and gynae, not really thinking about it. This is from my first week on labour ward, 19th of September 2005. First von Tooth extraction. I suddenly feel like an obstetrician. It's a pretty notional job title until you can, actually extract a baby. My registrar, Lily, talks me through it gently, but I do it all myself and it feels great. Congratulations, you did amazingly well there, says Lily. Thank you, I reply, then realise she's actually talking to the mother. 25th of December 2005. Good news, bad news. Good news, it's Christmas morning. Bad news, I have to work on labour ward. Worse news, my phone goes off. It's my registrar. I didn't set my alarm and now they're wondering where the hell I am. Even worse news, I'm asleep in my car and it takes me a while to establish where I am or why. Good news, it seems I fell asleep after my shift last night and I'm already at work in the hospital car park. I leap out the car, grab a quick shower, then I'm good to go and only 10 minutes late. So these diaries I kept, and I didn't think they would ever be read by anyone other than me. It's sort of after the event, I realised it was my form of therapy, and they sort of, when I left medicine in 2010, in the end, when I left medicine in 2010, they sat in a filing cabinet. I'd occasionally refer to them to upset guests at dinner parties. But other than that, it was a sort of part of my life I wasn't particularly keen to revisit. And then a few years ago, you will remember, and I'm sure a huge number of you were a part of it, down on the other side of the border, the doctors ended up going on strike. And the doctors, for various reasons, and I think their representation be a huge part of this, lost the battles and lost the war. And the government had this big lie that they were striking because of money, because it was about being greedy and wanting more, which was obviously incorrect. But the doctors didn't get their message across, and it was heartbreaking as someone who knew what it was like to be in the profession as a junior doctor, who was now consuming the media on the outside. It's very genuinely distressing to hear public sympathy turn against doctors. I thought if people knew the ins and outs of what the job actually is, it would be impossible for the public to believe that the doctors were in it for the wrong reasons. And so I tricked a publisher into publishing it, and here we are. But the secondary reason for doing it, which I realised could potentially result, and happily, I guess in a way did, is it means that when you're a doctor, you've got something to show to your mates and your family to say, this is what it's like. I just read out a diary from Christmas Day of the 7 Christmases I was an obstetrician. I managed to see my family for one of them, so it wasn't all bad. And I just wanted to point out the stuff that we know, the stuff that isn't just the hours, the actual effects on all sorts of in all sorts of ways on actual human beings. This is from the 21st of July 2006. Leap to the gynae ward at 5 a.m. to write a discharge summary. On my way out, I noticed the light is on in patient CR's side room, so I popped my head in to check if everything's okay. I admitted her from A&E last week with tense ascites and the suspicion of an ovarian mass. I've been on night since and not caught up with what's happened, she tells me. Suspicion of an ovarian mass has become a diagnosis of ovarian cancer, has become confirmation of widespread metastases, has become talk of a few months left. When I first saw her in A&E, despite obvious suspicions, I didn't say the word cancer. I was taught that if you say the word even in passing, that's all a patient remembers. You've basically said cancer, cancer, cancer for half an hour. And not that you'd ever want a patient to have cancer, of course, but I really, really didn't want her to. Friendly, funny, chatty, despite the litres of fluid in her abdomen splinting her breathing. We were like 2 long-lost pals finding themselves next to each other at a bus stop and catching up on all our years apart. Her son has a place at medical school. Her daughter's at the same school my sister went to. She recognised my socks with Duchamp. I stuck in a banana catheter to take off the fluid and admitted her to the ward for the day team to investigate. And now she's telling me what they found. She bursts into tears, and out come all the will nevers, the crushing realisation that forever is just a word on the front of Valentine's cards. Her son will qualify for medical school, she won't be there. Her daughter will get married, she won't be able to help with the table plan or throw confetti. She'll never meet her grandchildren. Her husband will never get over it. He doesn't even know how to work the thermostat. She laughs, so I laugh. I really don't know what to say. I want to lie and tell her that everything's going to be fine, but we both know that it won't. I hug her. I've never hugged a patient before. In fact, I think I've only hugged a grand total of 5 people, and one of my parents isn't on that list, but I don't really know what else to do. We talk about boring practical things, rational concerns, irrational concerns, and I can see from her eyes that it's helping her. It suddenly strikes me I'm almost certainly the first person she's opened up to about all this, the only one she's been totally honest with. It's a strange privilege, an honour I didn't ask for. The other thing I realise is that none of her many, many concerns are about herself. It's all about the kids, her husband, her sister, her friends. Maybe that's the definition of a good person. She asked me if she shouldn't have her ashes scattered on the Scilly Isles. It's her favourite spot, but she doesn't want it to be a sad place for her family once she's gone. The undiluted selflessness of someone fully aware what her absence will do to those she leaves behind. My bleep goes off. It's the morning SHO asking for handover. I've spent 2 hours in this room, the longest I've ever spent with a patient who wasn't under anaesthetic. On the way home, I phoned my mum to tell her I love her. So that's the sort of story I wanted people to read more than the objects in orifices stuff. I felt I was at a mixing desk and had all these different channels of stories I could tell. I had huge quantities of diaries. I needed to choose what to pick. And there's the funny versus the sad versus the mundane versus the high octane versus the petty bureaucracy and the effect at home and the effect at work. And I had to get the channels right so it was a fair depiction of the gig as a junior doctor, but also fighting against that. If I'd have called the book a harrowing polemic about the plight of the NHS junior doctor, it would have sold 12 copies. And so I sort of had to sort of major on the funny. But that's the sort of stuff I wanted people to get. The idea that, if you remember back to GCSE physics, they tell you that every action's got an equal and opposite reaction. It's never equal. Obviously, it can never be. It would never be. But there's always an opposite reaction. I don't think people thought a lot about how their doctors feel. They're just the bloke in the clinic. There was an antenatal clinic I did as a reg for a whole year, so probably 50-odd weeks in that clinic. And it always ran 3 hours late, the traditional mismatch between staff and patients. And every single time at 7 o'clock, the patients would be going nuts, and rightly, and saying, who's doing the babysitting? My car's got a ticket. And I would apologise. And not once in a year did a patient say, oh, you probably don't want to be here either. Because obviously I didn't. No one wants to. And so all that sort of stuff. The fact that, you move hospital once a year. We're currently in the Deanery of Scotland, and that's a very inconvenient area to buy a flat that's handy for all of Scotland. And unless you exist in a vacuum, it means you say to someone, do you mind if we move 70 miles away? They might say yes once. They're not going to say yes 8 years in a row. The fact that when it's 5 o'clock and someone starts bleeding out, you stay there and sort it out because there's no slack in the system. Who else is going to do it? So, you stay, and that means you're inevitably texting someone to say, oh, sorry, I'm going to have to bail on drinks or dinner tonight. And because this happens often enough, by the time you've texted the same friend 3 times in a row for 3 separate emergencies, you've become the flaky mate and you stop getting invited out to stuff, so your social circle weirdly contracts. That's the sort of stuff I wanted people to know about. But then again, I quite like the funny stories as well. I'm a registrar now, so obstetric reg is, I guess, your natural predator, isn't it? Ureter-wise. This is from the 12th of February 2007. Prescribing a morning after pill in A&E, the patient says, I slept with 3 guys last night. Will 1 pill be enough? The answer's yes, urologists. I guess this is my gynae counterpoint to the degloved penis, and it's from the 29th of February 2008. And I think this is my favourite diary entry. I went on the ITV show this morning, not this morning, you know, the one with Philip Schofield and Holly Thing, and Philip Schofield said, "What's your favourite diary entry from the book?" And I said it was this, so indulge me. Special occasions call for patients to insert special types of objects into their vaginas and recta. And indeed urethras, of course. Christmas in particular has rewarded me well with a stuck fairy, a swollen vulva from a mistletoe contact allergy, and vaginal burns from a patient stuffing a string of lights inside and switching them on. Which brings new meaning to the phrase, "I put the Christmas lights up myself." Two very different types of reactions to the orifice stories from medics and non-medics. So non-medics say, "Surely no one did that thing." And medics say, "That's nothing. Here's my top 10 things patients have." Patient JB decided to take advantage of tradition and propose to her boyfriend, going to the expense of buying an engagement ring, the trouble of putting it inside a Kinder Surprise egg, and the imagination of inserting it vaginally. Her partner would discover it, retrieve it, and then she would go down on one knee. Equal parts unexpected, disgusting, and I suppose romantic. At this point on the TV show, the producer stood behind the camera going, "Stop, stop." And I didn't. Unfortunately, the boyfriend was unable to retrieve it as planned. It had rotated itself lengthwise, and no amount of sugaring from either of them would get this particular goose to lay its golden egg. Remarkably, she was so keen to maintain the surprise, she wouldn't tell him what she'd done or why, but eventually decided it was a hospital matter, so we all met in cubicle 3. It was a very easy delivery with a pair of sponge-holding forceps. Now, she hadn't told me about the contents of this egg either at this point, so there was a moment of confusion for both me and the boyfriend when she asked him to open it. I passed him a pair of latex gloves, sandblasting the last trace of romance from the scenario. She popped the question, and he said yes, presumably out of fear as to what a woman who does that with a Kinder Surprise would do to him if spurned. Well, I'm now a senior registrar, so I get to be called Mr. K rather than Dr. K, which makes the previous decade of studying feel like a fucking waste of time, doesn't it? 25th of August 2010, an 85-year-old long-stay gynae cancer patient breaks our hearts on yesterday's ward round. She misses her late husband, her children have barely visited, and she can't even have a usual whiskey nightcap. I decided to play Boy Scout and prescribe whiskey 50 mils nightly on a drug chart. I gave the house officer 20 quid of my money to get a bottle from the supermarket to pass on to the nursing staff so they could fulfill the prescription on their drug round. This morning, the ward sister reports the patient declined her drink because, quote, Jack Daniels is fucking cat piss. I mean, there's another fader on this mixing desk of amazing things that older patients said. There's probably a whole book in that. 5th of December 2010, spending a sunny Sunday afternoon on labour ward with an excellent SHO. She asked me to review the CTG. Remember that? No. She asked me to review the CTG of a patient, and I agree with her assessment the patient needs an urgent caesarean section for fetal distress. They are a lovely couple, recently married. It's their first baby, and they understand the situation. The SHO asks if she can perform the caesarean while I assist. In theatre, the SHO goes through the layers: skin, fat, muscle, peritoneum 1, peritoneum 2, uterus. After the uterine incision, instead of amniotic fluid, blood comes out, a lot of blood. There's been an abruption. I stay calm and ask the SHO to deliver the baby. She says she can't, there's something in the way. I take over the operation, the placenta is in the way. The patient has an undiagnosed placenta previa. This should have been noticed on scans. She should never have been allowed to go into labour. I deliver the placenta, then deliver the baby. The baby is clearly dead. Paediatricians attempt resuscitation with no success. The patient's bleeding heavily from the uterus, 1 litre, 2 litres. My stitches have no effect, drugs have no effect. I call for the consultant to come in urgently from home. The patient's now under general and receiving emergency blood transfusions, blood loss 5 litres. I try a brace suture, no luck. I'm squeezing the uterus as hard as I can with both of my hands. It's the only thing that stops the bleeding. My consultant arrives, attempts another brace suture, it doesn't work. I can see the panic in her eyes. The anaesthetist is telling us he can't get fluids into the patient fast enough to replace what she's losing. We're risking organ damage. My consultant calls in another colleague. He's not on duty. He's the most experienced surgeon we can think of. We take it in turn, squeezing the uterus until he arrives 20 minutes later. He performs a hysterectomy. The bleeding's finally under control, 12 litres. The patient goes to intensive care, and I'm warned to expect the worst. My consultant talks to the husband. I start to write out my operation notes, but instead just cry for an hour. And that's the last diary entry that I made, and within a month or so of that, I'd left the profession. And those people who knew what had happened would try and, make me, or they'd remind me that if you're the most senior obstetrician on a ward, you will have some kind of big disaster every 5 or 6 years, and it's not about how good you are, or how hard you train, or how many qualifications you accrue. It's just the sad fact of the job. But that made me realize that I couldn't face that happening to me ever again, let alone twice a decade. And because I'm made of the wrong stuff, and no one told me the stuff that I needed to be made of. And then afterwards, I was trained to not talk about it, because doctors don't talk about it. And I'm certain that every one of you in this room has had your own terrible days at work, and you probably thought back to that when I was reading out that last diary entry. It's impossible not to have them. And it's impossible to ever forget about them. And I wanted to just talk a bit, before I finish, about some of the correspondence I get. I get, at least once a week, I get a message from a very senior doctor, a retired professor, a head of a department. Always starts the same way. I've never told anyone this, but. I've never told anyone this, but. And then telling me some awful tragedy that happened 20 years ago, and it still haunts them at the foot of their beds every night. And they didn't tell their colleagues, and they haven't told their friends and their families and their partners. And I was exactly the same. You're not meant to do it. That's how I was taught. And so my parents knew I'd left medicine. They didn't know why I'd left medicine until 18 months ago when my book first came out in hardback. And I didn't even send them a free copy. They had to buy it. Which is actually true, because even sending that book off myself was slightly too close to doing the thing I wasn't meant to do. And that's not healthy. But that taught me one thing. The other thing that really struck me from my email inbox is it's only happened half a dozen times, but I've had messages saying I'm histrionic, and what did I think was going to happen, and man up, and grow a pair, and lovely phrases like that. And that's made me realize that it's crucial that I go around the country, around the world now, and bang this particular gong. 'Cause there are people who think that. You're not people who think that, because you're the kind of people who want to better yourselves and come to conferences. But there are. I've got sort of etched into my memories is a time when I was a medical student on a gastrosurgery ward round. And it was the first year at my medical school they'd formally taught communication skills. And it feels strange saying that now. You'd think it's always been there as a cornerstone in medicine, but my place, it had to have a first year, and I was in that first year. And I said to this consultant, I'm sorry, I need to dash off now, communication skills teaching. And he said, you can't teach communication skills, you've either got it or you don't. Which is what this man thought. And the green shoots are starting to show in terms of, they're calling it resilience, which is clearly the wrong word. That sort of implies you have to deal with any amount of crap that's thrown at you. But coping strategies, there are coping strategies. You use evidence in your day-to-day practice. Well, I don't know, urologist. You're meant to use evidence in your day-to-day practice. There is evidence for how to cope, for taking time out, for talking to people, for mindfulness, for yoga, for religion, if that's your thing, for tea even. But we sort of try to ignore that and just pretend that we can. Anyway, so what am I telling you? It's a very big ship to steer to get to a point where it's okay to talk about these things, and it's okay to say you've had a cry at work. But wherever you are on this ladder, you can do something. If you're involved with medical school admissions, make sure you're recruiting the right people. If you're involved with recruiting to your own specialty, make sure you're honest about what it involved. There's one consultant, a wonderful consultant in London called Katrina Erskine, who tells her trainees on their first day, and this is brutal and I'm sorry to say it, but she says, by the time you retire, there's going to be a busload of dead babies and kids with cerebral palsy, and if you can't handle the fact that your name is on that bus, then don't go in the first place. So you need to look after your juniors. I hope none of you insist that a single doctor calls you Mr. Bloggs. I hope you're on first name terms with them, because why would you not be? They need to come to you in times of need and distress. That's never going to happen if they're calling you Professor Surname, Mr. Surname. That's not good. Sort it out if you are. I know it's a hard-fought job title. People fight me on this, but no, this is more important, that you're accessible to the people who might be struggling. There's a crisis in recruitment and retention at the moment. Don't contribute to that. You take them out for a bowl of pasta. I remember every single time a consultant socialized with me over the years I worked, and it helped me, and it's obviously there's no real team structure anymore. That's so difficult because there are so many scars on the rota. You're sort of bashing around in Brownian motion. But the most important thing you can do is to look after yourselves, because you can't look after your patients if you're not looking after yourselves. You can't be the best version of the doctor you want to be if you're not looking after yourselves. And it doesn't matter whether you're a first-year trainee or a final-year head of department. You're still just some 16-year-old who put a tick on a UCAS form, not really thinking about it, and you could have gone into architecture or law or accountancy if you weren't so bright. But you didn't. You chose medicine, but you do an amazing job. There's nothing magic about you. You do still have these things going on, and don't be ashamed to talk to people. So yeah. Anyway, that's my upbeat end to my little talk. But that's the thing that I always feel that I have to tell people. So thanks so much for indulging me, and look after yourselves. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. That was brilliant. I think we've got a clear suggestion for what our trainee conference next year needs to start with. I think it was that was absolutely brilliant. But I personally could sort of relate to some of the challenges we all have as individuals and as groups. So I think maybe as BAUS as a group or BSOT as a group, we could certainly do more to help each other and work out how to deal with all of the difficult things we experience. And maybe next year we'll have a section for objects and orifices as well. I think that's missing from the programme. So I just wanted to say thank you for everyone who's contributed this afternoon. I don't know if they're here. Just wanted to say thank you to all of the BAUS staff. So in particular, Harry Heald and Louise Finch. They've been absolutely brilliant. I think us as trainees have brought a whole new set of challenges to the BAUS organising team. So can we just give the BAUS sort of backroom staff a big clap, please? It's just beginning, because next year's conference will be very exciting. So just a reminder, we've still got University Challenge to come at 5 o'clock. So stick around for that. So it's great to move on to the Silver Cystoscope Award. Again, I had to change my slides because there was a slide here saying all the things we're looking for, and a slide afterwards saying all of the things that the winner has, and the slides were too similar, so I cut one of them out. But it's a clear winner. We had nominations from all over the country. And just some of the highlights are listed here. The full nomination is on Twitter now. So the winner has been described as an exceptional trainer. He's gone over and above his duties as a trainer and a supervisor for trainees, both home and abroad. He's done mock FRCS exams and vivas, always with exceptional feedback. Works tirelessly to mentor those around him, and also to go that next level to look after the hospital in the region and their sort of trainees and their educational needs. So overall, he's been a superb mentor over the last 5 years, and I'm sure beyond as well. He's always been available to offer help either in person or over the phone. And I think that's absolutely brilliant, and that's what all of us are looking for in a consultant. So it's a massive pleasure to award the Storts Silver Cystoscope Award to Mr. Herman Fernando from the West Midlands.
So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely honored to be receiving this Bowes Silver Telescope Award for this year. I thank the Bowes section of trainees for selecting me. I thank Carl Storts for sponsoring this award. I thank the West Midlands trainees for nominating me in the first place. Urological training has always been difficult, and it's getting increasingly more difficult with shorter training times, on-calls, rotations, travel, family commitments, CCT guidelines, which keep changing. And I feel as a trainer, it's important to recognize that particular challenge in each trainee and provide him an optimal environment for him to progress in his training and his career. I was fortunate enough to have excellent trainers in West Midlands, where I was trained, and I've used them as a template for my trainees as well. This award feels special to me because, one, I've been selected by the trainees, and two, at the end of the day, I'm just an AES in my trust. I hold no Royal College positions, no Bowes positions, no university positions, no deanery positions. I thank my colleagues in the University Hospital of North Midlands NHS Trust, Stoke-on-Trent, who always supported me in all my training initiatives. I thank my family, my wife, my daughter, my parents, who are quite supportive of me during my years of training. And as a trainer, whenever I took my time off to concentrate on my teaching and training activities. And finally, I thank the Almighty for keeping me where I am. Thank you. Thanks, one and all.
Thank you very much. That brings a close to the BSOT session. Quickly get a drink and then be back for University Challenge at 5. Thank you very much, everyone.
It was chemistry because we learned how to make alcohol.
Very good, very good. Okay, so the rules of the game, team, are there's a starter question for 10 points. You're allowed to compete to who's got the right to answer the starter question. If you buzz in correctly or get it wrong, it will be thrown over to the other side. Once you've got a starter question, you have three questions in the round worth 5 points each, okay? So the first starter for 10 is, fingers on those buzzers, wrong program, never mind. Which is the only bird that can fly backwards?
Cons Pierce.
Hummingbird.
Correct. Well done. So, that allows you to go into the endourology round. What? So, first question. In what decade was the first laser used to fragment urinary tract stones? Consultants only.
What's a laser?
Could I have to hurry your consultants?
The 1990s.
1990s? No, the 1960s. Keith Parsons used it in 1966 to fragment neurostones in a dog. Okay, what are the 3 properties of laser light? I want all 3 for 5 points.
A flat in London. Sorry?
Yeah. Too much delay. Trainees, what are the 3 properties of laser light?
Coherence, collimation, and monochronicity.
Wow, impressive. It's 5 points for the trainees. Going back to the consultants, a bit quicker this time. What kind of crystal is this?
It's pretty.
What's it made of? I take it none of your endourologists.
Weatherlight.
Sorry. What?
Are you making words up? Yeah, I think so. I nominate Mr. Modgill.
Just one answer, guys. It's not that difficult.
Like
Try it.
A weather light or something like crystal?
Trainees, what kind of crystal is it?
They look like amorphous shards, so uric acid.
No, it's calcium phosphate.
Oh.
Next starter for 10. Okay, general knowledge question. So, according to popular belief, what was the native language of Jesus Christ?
Besot McPhee.
Aramaic.
Yes, correct. Well done.
Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff.
Okay, so this gets you into the general knowledge round. Okay. For trainees only. What's the national animal of Scotland?
The unicorn.
Yeah, long-legged or short-legged version?
One size long and one size short.
I have to hurry, you trainees?
That's the unicorn.
Correct, the unicorn. What year was the Glasgow City Chambers building completed? The one we had the drinks reception in last night, if you were there.
No idea.
I have to hurry you. I want an exact year. Decade will do.
1800s.
No, a decade, not a century.
Well,
-5 for the trainees, please. A decade is a period of 10 years, usually.
Well, I meant
1888. Okay. Third question. What town in Scotland is known as the home of golf? Oh, dear.
Come on.
St Andrews.
Yes, correct, St Andrews. Well done. So at the end of 2 rounds, it's 32 for the trainees and 15 for the consultants. Let's give them a big cheer of applause.
I didn't get 15.
Okay, right, get ready to compete on those buzzers. Which deadly disease, prevalent since antiquity, was finally and officially declared eradicated in the year 1980?
Cons Pierce.
Polio.
Nope. Trainees.
Smallpox?
Yep, correct. Well done. A lesson for not pressing too soon there, Mr. Pierce.
Thank you.
Okay, so round 3, oncology. According to national CRUK statistics, how many cases of prostate cancer are diagnosed each year?
30,000.
Nope, I'm going to throw that open to the nearest 5,000. I have to hurry you.
65,000.
Nope, it's 47,700. Second round question for the trainees only. What is the critical volume of cases required to make robotic surgery cost-effective in the NHS setting? Who pressed that? Morrison. -5 for the consultants, please. Trainees.
I think it's 150.
150.
Correct, 150 from Professor Pickard's work. Which of the following embryological structures? Oh no, which embryological structure does a ureter arise from? Don't have to buzz.
Okay, sorry. Well, the ureteric bud.
Mesonephros. I was looking for that. Okay. Okay, so next general knowledge question. Starter for 10. I think the consultants may have a chance of this one. Which rock band, formed in 1968, okay, was made up of the following performers? Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Bonham, John Paul Jones. Oh my goodness.
Besot Fuge.
Led Zeppelin.
Yep, correct. Led Zeppelin. Well done. 10 points to the consultants. Hang on, what are you doing? No, it's the consultants at the bottom, aren't they? So 10 to the consultants. I think.
No, the trainees got the right answer.
Did he? I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, -5 for not being loud enough, or for me being too deaf.
Specsavers have a special offer on at the moment.
Okay, in fact, there's a dispute there, so we're going to have another starter question for 10, okay? Okay.
Not sure about this.
Don't worry, we all know what's going to happen. Which is the highest waterfall in the world?
Iguazu Falls.
Nope. Trainees?
Victoria Falls?
Nope, it's the Angel Falls in Venezuela. Another starter question. Of Henry VIII's 6 queens, how many were executed?
Cons Pierce.
4.
It's 2. Okay. And consultants, I don't want you pressing the button and then conferring before you come with the answer. You've got to press, come up with an answer. All right? You've been warned. Okay, another starter question for 10. Which mammal, excluding man, native to Britain, is Britain's largest land carnivore?
Besot McPhee.
The badger.
Correct. Well done.
Lovely stuff. Lovely, Arthur. Lovely.
So moving on to pop culture. As if we could really care, what is the name of Kim Kardashian and Kanye West's first child?
Northwest.
Wow, amazing. Yes, it is. Northwest.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have a lot of time on your hands. Well done. Second question. Name the couple, as if we care, who won Love Island in 2018. No, this is a round question.
I devised this.
-5 for the consultants, please. Trainees.
Jack and Danny Dyer.
Sorry, who?
Danny Dyer and Jack Fincham.
Yes, correct. Well done.
That is ridiculous knowledge.
Still just with the trainees, Rachel. Who won the Best Actress Academy Award in 2019? Gonna have to hurry you.
Olivia Colman.
Indeed, correct. Well done. Okay, so consultants, your work is cut out really. You have to start sort of just not embarrassing as much.
All right, we're just forming up.
It's fine.
Okay. Do you want to swap members of teams? Just
Yeah.
No. All right. Okay. Okay. Start question for 10. Which town in Suffolk is the home of the National Horse Racing Museum?
Besot Fuge.
Newmarket.
Correct. Newmarket it is. So we're moving to the female neurological and neurodynamic urology round. So, 2 questions, I guess. Well, there's 2 questions. Just one answer for this, really. What is this for 5 points? Trainees only.
It's the activation for the artificial sphincter, the pump.
Yep, correct. Well done. What is this graft called?
Marsh's fat pad graft.
Very good. Correct indeed. And answer this, only the first question. What is this?
A time lead for a sacral neuromodulator.
My goodness, 5 points, an extra 5 for too much information. Well done. Okay. Starter question for 10. Come on, consultants, you can do it. Really, fingers on those buzzers. This is all probably when you were alive and at medical school or training already. So in which year did the Berlin Wall come down?
Cons Pierce.
1992.
Trainees? Quickly?
1990?
No, it was 1989. Close. Hard luck. Okay, so ready to compete, both teams? The next starter question. Which country is made up of 13,667 islands?
Cons Pierce.
Indonesia.
Correct. Well done.
Oh, well done. Hey.
You're just a little bit behind at the moment.
Touching distance.
And this is quite an appropriate round. This is the history of urology, guys, okay? So where was ESWL invented? Which city?
Is it it's Germany. Do you definitely need a city?
I might take points off for challenging you. Yeah, that's the city.
Hamburg. Hamburg.
Okay, 5 points for the city, 5 points for the country.
Germany.
Country is
West Germany.
Germany will do. Well done. 5 points. Thank goodness. and the city? Want to reconsider your...
We think it's Hamburg.
No, you believe wrong. It's Munich. Okay. When was the first TURP performed?
Oh God, why didn't I read that?
I think Steve Payne did this one, didn't he? Actually.
Do you want the exact date or within the last?
5 years either way.
5 years. All right. So we say mid-60s.
1926. Close. Which famous 18th century lithotomist died from eating an excess of hot buns?
Was it Frère Jacques?
Obvious, really.
Go for it.
Frère Jacques.
Trainees, as if you might know. No history buffs. William Cheselden. Okay. Okay, so another starter for 10 question. Which is the only island county in England?
Cons Pierce.
Is it the Isle of Man?
Nope.
Besot Tolofari.
That's me, yeah. Jersey?
Sorry?
Jersey.
In England? No, it's the Isle of Wight. Okay. Another starter for 10. Which civilization flourished in the Andes from the 12th to 15th century AD?
Cons Pierce.
Is it the Incas?
It is the Incas. Well done. Correct. So that takes you on to round 7, which is andrology and genitoureteral surgery.
I nominate Mr. Modgill.
I've got to go, actually.
Which animal's penis is permanently erect?
Is it?
Boris Johnson.
I don't think it's the unicorn either. But,
Alpaca. Are you joking? We think Mr. Mod...
Come on, I have to hurry you.
Is it alpacas?
Sorry?
Alpaca?
An alpaca. I think they have chlamydia in their spit, don't they? No, it's an American alligator.
Ah.
Mm.
The Donald.
What does PUVA stand for? PUVA.
It's a sports brand, isn't it?
Sorry?
Something... Haven't you done a fellowship?
Trainees?
Is it Sorolin UVA light?
Congratulations, yes, it is indeed. 5 points to trainees.
What was it?
Sorolin UVA. Right, back to the consultants. What is the name of the sex-determining gene on the Y chromosome?
Don't get this wrong.
Come on, I'm going to have to hurry you, consultants.
We'll take it, it's fine.
-5 for being stropping with the trainees.
Thank you.
Yes, it is the SRY gene. -5 for the trainees. Come on. It's not as if they're going to lose, is it, really, I would imagine?
No.
Well, they might do. You never know. Anything can happen in this game. Okay, that's too easy. Okay, which famous diamond, part of the British Crown Jewels, has a Persian name which means mountain of light?
Cons Pierce.
Is it the Kohinoor?
It is. Congratulations. Well done. So that takes you on to another endourology round. So you'll be good at this. What links the following things? 2100, the capital city of a Scandinavian country, and can you show the question? No. Thank you. Any answers from either team? Oh, sorry, it's the consultants. I have to hurry you. No confirming from the audience.
HOLEP.
Nope, the Homium Yag laser. Sympathy?
It's basically the same thing.
Detect
surely.
sympathy from the audience. Sympathy points for the consultants? Who votes for sympathy points for the consultants?
Yay.
Okay, 5 points for the consultants. Hang your head in shame. Oh, another crystal. What type of crystal is this?
Cystine.
Yes. Well done.
Why does it sound
Respect, respect. Another question. What type of crystal is this? It looks a bit like a coffin lid, apparently. It is typical of...
Indinavir.
Nope, struvite. Okay, so start a question for 10. Pardon?
Is that's a noisy trainee
Minus
in the
5
audience.
points for audience abuse from the trainees, please. Take them down to 97. Okay. Minus 10. Actually.
No, minus 10 even. better.
Minus 10. There you go.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, no, that's life. It's life. In which Italian city, it's a start for 10 question, is the Rialto Bridge?
Cons Pierce.
Venice.
Correct. Venice it is. Okay, pop culture. I know you'll be good at this, consultants. Name the highest grossing film of all time.
Is that adjusted for inflation or not?
I don't know, Mr. Pearce, I'm afraid. I shall seek... no. Come on, I have to hurry you.
We're going to say Titanic.
No. Trainees?
Avatar.
Yes, correct. 5 points for trainees. Back to the consultants. What's the most expensive paparazzi photograph ever sold was of which bold pop star? I'll give you a bit of clue. Temporarily bold.
What did you say, sorry?
Temporarily bold.
Yeah. Lady Gaga.
Nope. Trainees?
Britney Spears.
Exactly. And I'll give you another 5 points if you can tell me the reason why.
She just had her mental breakdown and she was attacking a...
No. Consultants?
A car
Do you
with
know
an
the
umbrella.
reason why she shaved her hair off?
Who was it, sorry?
Britney Spears.
After her wedding. Was it? After she got married.
Charity.
No.
Who's
Okay,
Britney
I think
Spears?
It was a DNA test, wasn't it? I think something to do with the DNA test.
really?
Yeah. Go on. Anyway, question 3. This is for the consultants. Who headlined Glastonbury Festival in 2016? That's a popular music festival in Somerset. Just in case you're wondering.
Coldplay.
Ooh, no, that would be minus 15. No. Any, trainees, anybody?
I think I was there. Was it Dolly Parton?
Who? Dolly Parton. Adele. Similarity, I suppose. Okay. Starter for 10, both teams. In which US state are the cities of Las Vegas, Carson City, and Reno?
Bishop McPhee.
Nevada.
Indeed, correct. Well done. 10 points to the trainees. Come on, consultants, you're going to have to get a move on. So, this takes you in, trainees, to the oncology round. According to the 2017 Bowes cystectomy audit, what is the UK median length of stay for a minimally invasive radical cystectomy? The answer on this card is Adele. We'll just have to make this
21.
one.
Is it 8 days?
Audience, what do you think? 8 days? A bit longer, isn't it? Sarah, how many is it?
You have to
It
say
is
it.
8.
Don't you defer it over?
Sorry? No, they got it right because I didn't know the answer. They're right. Okay. 8 days, correct. Well done, trainees. What is the... Okay. What is the altmetric score for the precision trial, New England Journal of Medicine 2018? Have to hurry, your trainees. No? Consultants?
200.
Pick a number, 780, which mentions the top 5% of published articles. Trainees, which of the following trials confirm surgical benefit with adjuvant chemotherapy after surgery for high-risk localized urothelial cancer, carcinoma of the ureter?
It was the POUT study.
It is, correct. 5 points. Well done. Okay, starter for 10. Points are currently 122 for the trainees, 55 for the consultants. There's still a one-eyed dog's chance, I should imagine, or something like that. Okay. Which female singing voice lies between soprano and contralto?
Gons Brown.
Alto? Alto?
Nope. Trainees?
Mezzo?
Mezzo what?
Mezzo soprano.
Yep, well done. So, female neurological and urodynamic urology round, just for trainees. What does this view behind on the screens show?
It's a Hunner's ulcer.
Correct. Yes, it is. Well done. Well done. What is the name of the anastomosis whilst constructing ileal conduit? What's the eponymous name of this?
You've got two there.
Yeah, there's two different ones. There's a Wallace on the left and a Bricker on the right.
You're absolutely right, it's Wallace, yes. Okay, fair enough. Who did these questions?
I think it was me.
5 points for the consultants for cheek, I like that. Plus 5. We need some sympathy, well done. What does this image show? And if a lady... Oh, God. What does this image show? Female.
Vesicovaginal fistula.
Yes, congratulations, well done. Okay, so moving on to the next starter for 10 questions. It's getting a little bit less close. The now extinct bird, the dodo, inhabited which island?
Consultants Modgill.
Madagascar.
What?
Madagascar.
Nope, trainees?
Papua New Guinea?
Nope, it was Mauritius. We'll start with another starter question for 10 points. Which is the longest river in England?
Cons Pierce.
7.
Yes, congratulations, well done. So that takes you on to andrology and genital urethral surgery round. Oh, and we have another male gender anatomy, genital anatomy question here. What is the reported length of the world's longest male penis? Held by Jonah Falcon. I think the record was held rather than being held by...
16 inches?
Held by Jonah Falcon when erect.
16 inches.
Nope, I'll hand that over to trainees. To the nearest half an inch.
14 inches.
Nope, it's 13.5 inches.
Sorry, I think we thought you said average penis.
World's longest male penis.
No, that's why we only said 16.
Is that right?
What did it say? It was 13.5.
That's the Manchester average, is it? Very good. In which city is the Coloplast Titan manufactured?
Minneapolis.
Well done. Okay, so how many cycles of inflation-deflation are inflatable penile implants tested to in the laboratory or production stage?
1,000.
No, 350,000. It's quite a lot, isn't it?
It's quite a lot.
Yeah, quite a lot.
What do they do in month 2?
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. Okay. This is an easy question. It involves some mathematics, so Mr. Fuse, you should be good at this one. Okay. How many squares are on a standard chessboard?
Cons Pierce.
64.
Congratulations, 64 it is. Consultants creeping up on the outside lane. So this is the last round, I'm afraid. So there we go. It's a guest publication for consultants only, missing words, and the journal we're taking it from is the British Brick Society magazine. Man builds life-size Cliff Richard to...
Roger.
No. Trainees, any ideas? Any suggestions?
Demolish.
No, it's to protect his wife.
Demolish.
Another guest publication magazine now. This is the Window Cleaning magazine. Man keeps blank in his fridge.
Window?
Consultants.
Window?
No, good guess. Trainees.
Body.
Closer. 1,000 stolen eggs. From the Spinning News magazine. Mum, I've accidentally...
Got pregnant.
No. Trainees.
Become a urologist.
That's a good answer. 10 points for that. It's no. Mum, I accidentally bought an £8,000 digger on eBay. Obvious when you know what. So that's it, folks, really. The final scores on the boards are 157 for the trainees, which are round up to 160, and 85 for the consultants. I'd like to thank both teams for being really good sports and the audience participation when required. Thank you very much.
Nice. Well done.